So our first question for tonight goes, I understand there is Vesak celebrations held at the monastery on the 11th and 12th of May. Will it be on Facebook Live?
It should be, barring technical difficulties, which are happening less and less these days. We are conquering the technology finally. So we hope to live stream most of it. Sometimes we turn it off during long periods of meditation because we meditate all night. And so sometimes we put a pause on it, and then when there's the next activity like the chanting or the Dhamma talk, then you'll see it live. So yes, we hope to have at least part of the all-night meditation activities live streamed. Of course, if you're watching at home, we encourage you to be sincere, practicing, like not watching from your bed, just lying there watching Facebook until you fall asleep. That's not much good. It's a night to think of the Buddha. The Buddha meditated all night and he said, I'm not getting up until I'm enlightened. We need a bit more of that, don't we, in our life? Need to sit longer, try harder. We all know what it's like being lazy. I do. I'm sure you do. That's no longer the way now. We're going the way of effort, energy, following the Buddha, our teacher. He taught us to have virya, means effort, energy, and really means persistent effort, or sometimes they translate that as heroic effort. So Visakha or Vesak is the night to be a hero, to try in your practice, put more effort forth. So yes, if Facebook can help with that, if you're somewhere else in the world and you can't be here, well, all well and good.
Sugato. Another question. Venerable Sir, according to the scriptures, one of the qualities of the Buddha is sugato. What is the meaning of the sugato quality? Sadhu.
I think literally it means one who is well gone, who goes well. So you can imagine if there's an enlightened Buddha there, wherever he's going, he's going to go well. Most of the time, I think the Buddha was just walking. Whenever he traveled, he just walked from village to village, place to place, forest to forest. But he always went well. So even when the Buddha was tired physically, his mind was still well and good. If he met grumpy people who were rude to him, his mind still was in a good place, so he went well. If you're enlightened, your conduct, your physical conduct is always, we say, beautiful. He's always patient. He's always restrained, mindful in the way he does things, in the way he speaks. So he always goes well. He's happy. So this prefix su means basically it's coming from happiness or well-being. The Buddha is constantly experiencing well-being. That's why we're practicing. We want to be experiencing well-being like the Buddha and like the Arahants. He's not dukkhato. Du means like dukkha, from dukkha, suffering. We don't want to be going with suffering, stressed, tense, unhappy, grumpy. We're not practicing for that. So ask yourself, as you walk into work tomorrow morning, or as you go shopping tomorrow, or as you get up and just walk around your house tomorrow, are you going to be like the Buddha, walking well and peacefully and mindfully and with a sense of well-being and kindness? Or are you going to walk around unhappy, stressed, miserable? Maybe you might say a bit of a simplistic way of looking at things, but this is one of the ways they describe the Buddha. He's one who's always going well. He's at ease, at peace within himself. He's happy.
Another question. Paul, why do some monks segregate nuns by the color of their robes? Would you segregate, for example, before a lay devotee went to a retreat in a monastery, then after being ordained, she wanted to go back and do a short retreat, but was rejected because of her robe's color. Please advise. Sadhu.
There's probably different levels of this question to answer this. On the highest level, enlightenment is nothing about the color of your robes or clothing. It's about seeing all phenomena as impermanent, unsatisfactory, not self, seeing this world of empty, so as empty. So whether you're wearing, white robes, brown robes, gray robes, dark red robes, this color robe, that color robe, these things are all empty of attachment, empty of self for an enlightened one. So it doesn't really matter. But then we have the conventional level of reality. So in conventional terms, well, we have uniforms. Even monks and nuns have their uniform, which will vary from tradition to tradition, country to country. So the way it varies is color sometimes, as well as style. I'm not even wearing a proper robe now. I'm wearing a blanket because I'm a bit cold because the outside is quite cold tonight. So I'm wearing a brown colored blanket. It's just, we reflect, right? Robes are just for modesty, because it would be embarrassing if I was sitting here naked. It was for warmth in a cold climate. It's for keeping the sun off you in a hot climate. It's to stop the bugs from biting you when there's bugs around. And robes do that. Whether you got orange robes, white robes, blue robes, whatever color robes, you're not actually allowed to wear blue robes. The Buddha forbade blue robes. But of all the shades of color that you can wear as a monk or a nun, it's the purpose is the important thing. These robes are made from the four elements for a purpose, to protect you, make life convenient, to save you being embarrassed walking around. Because in the old days, they did have naked ascetics walking around. And the Buddha made a rule saying monks can't go naked, nuns can't go naked. So there's reasons why we wear robes. But as far as colors go, well, we have colors according to the Vinaya, and each tradition may take those colors. So our tradition, we use natural dye from the jackfruit tree, but it could be another kind of tree. So some trees will give you a slightly darker, some will give you a slightly lighter color. And for nuns, they could wear the same color as I'm wearing now, this kind of browny ochre color. In a monastery, they could wear this color. But then again, on another level, each monastery has their own rules and traditions and practices. So I can't speak for every monastery, because there's hundreds and thousands of monasteries and monks and nuns in the world. So I would recommend maybe, if you go to a monastery, first of all, as a layperson, trainee, will learn what their rules are, will learn how they do things. If you're happy, comfortable with the way they train, the way they do things, well, just follow along. So when I became a monk, I wasn't too bothered about what color the robes would be. There was just a natural dye color. And then the nuns in Thailand, where I lived, the nuns, there were actually, when I began, there was one nun wearing brown and there was other nuns wearing white. In Thailand, the most common color for nuns is white. I felt sorry for the nuns, because when you wear white in the forest, it gets dirty. You have to put a lot of effort into keeping your robes clean. So I actually felt sorry for them. But at least I knew who was a nun and who was a monk. One of the problems is when they both have the same color and the same design is sometimes you misunderstand it, or you look wrongly and you think, oh, that's a nun or that's a monk. And it happens, and it has happened. And people have mistaken the brown robed nun and the white robed nun sitting together as a monk and a nun sitting together and being too close and too intimate. That has happened. So that's one advantage of having different colors, is to, separate the genders. So, nun, monk, it can help. But it shouldn't really be an impediment to enlightenment or practicing the Dhamma. But why your particular friend was not allowed to stay, well, you have to go into the details of that monastery, what their rules, policies are. I can't really say because I wasn't there and I don't know where you're referring to. But I would say try and have a common sense, practical view that, robes are not the crucial element in enlightenment and cultivating the Buddhist path. Try and have a practical, common sense approach. Each monastery, decide what color, what style the robes are, and just follow along. It's only later when I became a monk, I had suffering over robes because we use natural dyes. Natural dyes are very unpredictable. It's not like factory dyed cloth, which, you know what you're getting. When you start off with white cotton cloth like we do, and then you use jackfruit dye, there's a lot of opportunity for suffering there. As a young monk, you're making your first batch of dye, and that involves chopping wood chips, boiling them up all night, literally all night you boil and you get this really thick color that then you boil down, reduce down until it's so thick that when you put the white cloth in there, it will absorb a browny, orangey brown color, and you start your new robes like that. But new robes always look very bright and light. And so when I got my first set of new robes, I put days and days of effort into making this natural dye. But whatever I did, I couldn't get the nice, rich color that the monks who'd been around longer had, because they've been around longer. And when your robes washed in the dye as well as being initially dyed, then you also wash them in the dye regularly. Well, your robes take on a richer and darker color. Most monks want that. But when you start, you have this light color, and all my friends call me the banana monk. So it's not just nuns who have suffering over their robes, monks as well. So I was called the banana monk for a few weeks until my robe got a bit darker. And your robes also get stained very easily when they're new, because this natural dye stains. So if you drop food on them, or water, or you rub mud on them somehow, or you're in the forest. The worst one I ever had was the forest jackfruit in Lumpur Nuns Monastery. They have these forest jackfruit trees, which are really tall, and they have these little jackfruits which drop down without any warning. And if they drop on your robe gets stained indelibly forever. It's like permanent marker. You get this kind of resiny stain on your robe and you start looking not very good. So when that happened, I was in trouble as well. So I had lots of suffering with my robes as well. But I know the gender issue is one as well. Well, just try and sort it out in your monastery. Have one color, whatever the style for the nuns, one style for the monks. If everyone's agreed, then it's simple and you can move on to higher things, I would say. That would be the aim.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Ajahn had mentioned in your book that by killing a fish, one could suffer from some nasty vipaka karma. Although I cannot remember if I've killed any animals in this life before, I guess I must have done many wrongdoings via body, speech, and mind. So I feel a bit scared of any coming vipaka karma that I might suffer. Any good advice for this?
Well, Ajahn Chah's simple one was, if in doubt, don't do it. If in doubt, don't say it. Only when you're confident what you're going to do, what you're going to say is good karma and skillful and helpful, then say it or do it. So if you're in doubt, pause, be cautious, be careful, learn how to do that. And if you start young, so if you have parents or good Dhamma friends teaching you when you're young, you get into that habit. You're cautious. You think twice before saying or doing things. So like me, I went fishing because they bought me a fishing rod, gave me the fishing rod. Everyone else was fishing around there. So I went and fished. It was only when I tried killing a fish that I couldn't do it, physically couldn't kill the fish. I didn't have it in me. But I let it die because I didn't put it back in the water. So I guess it suffocated. And just seeing the suffering of a fish dying was enough for me. That was it. I don't want to go fishing anymore. If I'd been smarter, I'd have thought, because I did have my doubts before I went fishing. I thought, oh, this is not, I don't think this is very good. And when I caught the fish and let it die, I was sure it wasn't very good. But if I'd been smart following Ajahn Chah's teaching, but I hadn't met Ajahn Chah then, I would have said, no, don't do this. Follow my instinct, my gut, my intuition. So intuition can really help you even when you don't have a teacher or someone close by. Be careful because things come back on you. Things have consequences. So don't kill. Just do your best not to intentionally, deliberately kill. It's a pretty simple one. What do the Buddha say is the worst kinds of karma, what they call anantariya karma. So killing your mum and dad. Don't kill your mum and dad. It's pretty obvious, isn't it? But that doesn't just mean don't kill. It means don't harm them. So don't take your anger out on your parents. Don't physically hurt them. Don't take your anger out on your parents. If you do, apologize quickly because it's a very strong bad karma. So don't hurt your parents. Don't hurt a Buddha. Unfortunately, there's no Buddha around. But don't hurt an arahant, and you don't know who's an arahant or a noble one, Arya Pugala. You don't know. So be careful again. And really don't hurt anything because you don't know. Maybe that fish could be a bodhisattva. There are bodhisattva fish or birds can be bodhisattvas. You don't know. So err on the side of caution, I would. Don't say it, don't do it if you're in doubt. And just learn from your experience to be more careful. And sometimes we have to learn painful lessons. Just accept that, we make mistakes.
Sadhu Luang Por. I think another part of that question is they suspect they have done wrongdoings in possible past lives and are feeling scared of any potential coming vipaka karma, but they're not sure what they may have done in the past. But they seem, in the question, they feel scared of any coming vipaka karma that might come.
Good, because if you feel scared, you won't do it again, will you? You'll be concerned about the results, the consequences, so then you're careful. Because when you're scared, you become very careful, don't you? The reason we make a lot of karma is because we're careless. We're casual, we're foolish, we rush into things and make mistakes. So try not to try to use that fear of wrongdoing to your advantage. You say, oh yeah, I may have made karma before like this, I don't want to do it again. So it will make you think more carefully, consider things more carefully because you realize results matter. There are consequences to our actions. As far as what you've done in the past, you can't change that, can you? So you can only learn your lessons and try not to repeat the same mistakes. And if it's other people or beings that you've harmed, well, you try at least mentally to wish them well and seek forgiveness. Sometimes we seek forgiveness in person. Sometimes it just has to be a mental act because that person or that animal is no longer around. But you just develop the attitude of forgiveness, seeking forgiveness, and then determine to keep the precepts. So if you've killed in the past, just determine to keep the first precept from here on, and you'll never have that karma to worry about again because you're keeping the precept. If you've stolen in the past, and it has brought you regret, well, just undertake never to steal, never to take something that's not yours. And then you're free from that regret and free from that problem. It works like that. You have to undertake the precepts, then you've fixed your behavior. So the past, whatever's happened in the past, will no longer bother you. I don't mean that your past results won't come through. I just mean you'll never make those mistakes again. When they do give results, you've killed something and then you have your accident or illness, or you've hurt someone's feelings and then they come back and they hate you and they shout at you or they insult you. You just have to be very patient, and you understand, oh, this is my old karma coming back here, and just take it on the chin patiently. Don't get angry again. Don't repeat the same mistake.
Sadhu. Another question. It is suggested to see some incidences such as catching COVID while staying at a monastery that we experience due to our past karma. Is this correct?
Hard to say, isn't it? Some illnesses are just time and place. I mean, COVID was and still is so contagious that, it may not necessarily be some big karmic issue. It may just be the karma of being a human being, which is karma in itself, just being born as a human being, and human beings are sensitive to illness, viruses, and so on. It may be a very vague kind of karma just associated with being a human being. And if you catch COVID or other diseases and they don't have a very strong, the symptoms aren't very strong, you get through it quite easily, well, it's probably not related to too much karma from the past other than being a human being and being prone to illness or exposed to illness. But if you get ill and you're seriously ill and you almost die, or you do die, unfortunately it happens, so that may be a more particular kind of karma from the past. If your life is shortened, or you have extreme pain and suffering, or it leaves you with permanent damage, which some illnesses do, well, that may be a more specific kind of vibhaka or resultant karma. So some things are more, you get through them very easily. Some illnesses, you just sort of shake them off in a few days. Maybe it's just because you're a human being, and human beings sometimes get ill. But more specific injury, illness that has a bigger result for you, or more pain, more suffering, maybe that is a specific karmic act. You've hurt something or somebody in the past, and now it's coming through in this way, in this form of illness or injury. It can be like that. But you don't know, do you? If you can't recollect past lives or past karma, you can only speculate. So I wouldn't speculate too much. Maybe just reflect more generally. Oh, it's probably old karma coming through. I'll just have to bear with it, be patient with it. And as I said, undertake to keep the precepts so you don't make more bad karma of the same kind, and then you won't have to have so much pain and suffering in the future.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Is it correct that if we harm other animals or beings, usually we will receive the same or even bigger harm back to us?
Very hard to generalize. There's so many causes, conditions, factors involved. One guideline is if you hurt or kill somebody who keeps the precepts, it's worse karma than somebody who doesn't. If you hurt or kill a Buddha or an Arahant or a parent, somebody who has a very important karmic relationship with you, that karma is the worst kinds of karma. So, the more damage you do to good people, good things in the world, the worse the results are going to be. But that doesn't mean to say, you go and kill someone who is not living very well, it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean like that. We're just talking in a very kind of abstract way here about the hierarchy of karma and resultant karma. The simple reflection is don't kill anyone, don't hurt anyone, don't insult people, don't hurt people through your body, speech, or mind. But what results will come back to you from the unskillful karma you've made will all depend on a number of different factors, and how strong your intention was, how deliberate your intention was. Did you really mean it, or was it just a little bit? Was it passing, or was it a grudge that you built up over lifetimes and decades of life? The karma we make, the strength of the intention will vary. The amount of delusion will vary. What did the Buddha say? I think he said, if you knowingly hurt someone, that's better than hurting someone and you don't even realize. When I say don't even realize, what I mean is you do a deliberate act, but you don't see it as something bad. You don't see it as something unskillful. Maybe you justify it or rationalize it, or you're so deluded you don't see what you're doing. If you knowingly hurt someone, of course, that's bad. That's bad karma. But at least you know what you're doing. That's better than someone who doesn't even know what they're doing.
Sadhu Lumbo. Next question. Dear Ajahn, how to help a friend who is suffering but who is not a Buddhist and only wants to be distracted from her worries?
Well, that's the normal kind of unenlightened reaction to suffering. We just try to run away from it, distract ourselves from it in one way or another. And Buddhists will do that as well as non-Buddhists. So you encourage people to calm down the best they can, get some clarity, some mindfulness, and then reflect on what's going on. And quite often, many kinds of suffering people have are very ordinary and very easy to understand as just part of the normal human condition. And we don't have to actually mentally get too stressed or suffer a lot about them. We can just accept it. But we need some help there. So helping your friend, giving them some advice, sharing your own experience, if you've reflected on these things, that can help. Getting them to do some mindfulness practice may help. Getting them to listen to good teachings from teachers, whether it's Buddhist or non-Buddhist, that may help. There's a number of things you do to try and help them face up to their suffering, become mindful of it, understand it, apply some intelligence to it rather than just always distract from it. Because one thing that happens, if you're always seeking distraction from your suffering, often the root causes are not being addressed. It can get worse. It spreads, it comes up more strongly, more often, and gradually can overwhelm you. Whereas if you develop some patience, resilience, try to bring up the mindfulness, look at the suffering and understand it as suffering, you'll probably find it's less and less of a problem. It shrinks down in your experience. It's no longer overwhelming. It's no longer coming up so often. Usually we can learn to shrug suffering off if we face it and understand it for what it is.
Sadhu Lumbo. Another question. Dear Ajahn, thank you very much for the beautiful reflections. Can you please talk more about subject and object relationship with much metta and gratitude?
Well, there's a big subject. a lot you can say. As human beings, we're sensitive creatures. We live in a realm where we have senses. The average human being has eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin that can sense through touch. And then we have a mind, which is another doorway for sense contact, through memory and then thinking, ideas. So we have six senses, six sense doorways that are constantly active, bringing us information. And normally you have an eye and you have this sense of self arises. I'm seeing, when you pay attention to your eyes and what they're seeing, because of course sometimes you're thinking or with the ears or touching or tasting, we go through the senses one after another. But when your eye, for example, you've got seeing arising, seeing consciousness. There's something to see, there's light, there's an object to see, there's a healthy eye that can see, and then eye consciousness arises. There's the awareness of seeing. At the same time, the unenlightened mind, there'll be a sense of me seeing something. I am seeing that, the screen. I'm looking at the screen where you all are. I'm looking at this screen. So there's this sense of me and you, or me and an object, subject and object. And with a thought as well, there's me and I'm thinking, me and I'm feeling, me and I'm remembering things. There's always this sense of self arising with the experience for the unenlightened, untrained mind, and then the thing that is experienced. And even as you meditate, you start off, know the breath, there's the quality of knowing, mindful awareness, and then the breath, that which is known. So this is our normal experience. But as you're practicing meditation, you're calming down, you're clearing your mind up from a lot of distraction, the hindrances. So they may be that relationship, subject and object, may change. But that's something you have to investigate through your practice. We can theorize about it and discuss it, and that's helpful sometimes. But really, you need to practically observe what happens when you develop mindfulness on an object. You'll understand better this subject object relationship, and the sense of self starts to fade. You may get to a point where you're just one-pointed awareness on a single object, and the sense of self disappears for a while, takes that break, a holiday. And your whole way of looking at things, experiencing things, takes on a new light at that point. And then you can contemplate very well in a much more detached way, without so much of this subject-object thing. It's just knowing. Oh, it's knowing. And that can become more and more refined, be more and more trained with wisdom as well as mindfulness, to the point where subject-object maybe disappears and there's just knowing, but without any kind of attachment, any kind of sense of self. What we call the unconditioned nibbana. But we have to practice this. This is something you have to realize through the practice. And I would encourage you, just do a little bit of meditation. Already you get a slightly better understanding of what we're talking about here. But learn to practice mindfulness and observe your experience. You'll see better what we're talking about.
Sadhu Lumpur. Next question. Dear Venerable, how to forget someone who hurt you, particularly if you still need to have contact with that person? Is it enough to become aware of our thoughts and come back to our mantra, or is there something else that can be done? Thank you for any advice.
Well, maybe the short-term goal in the beginning, if someone's hurt you, is to have some form of meditation object that you can keep turning to help cut through the negative thoughts and memories that will come up, especially when you're around them or close to them. That is a good way to start with. So you might recite Buddho, for example. If you're with someone who has hurt you, you may feel very strong emotions when you're with them. You're angry, you're upset, you remember things. But at the same time, if you've been practicing previously, well, you also know a lot of this is mental defilement. It's not helpful. This is the cause of suffering. And you want to restrain it and then even abandon it. So you use your meditation object a lot around those people who stimulate these strong emotions. Buddho, Buddho, Buddho. And keep it going. You also keep your precepts. You don't fly off the handle and shout at them or scold them or argue with them, whatever. So there's a number of things you're practicing. You're being mindful of your precepts, mindful of your meditation object to help restrain the worst of your anger. But memory, you can't just wipe memory clean. So you're going to keep remembering, this is the person who has hurt me. More importantly is how you deal with the memory when it comes up, because you may be miles away and you can still remember them and get angry. So what do you do when that memory comes up? Well, you have to treat it with mindfulness. Recognize that any anger you fall into is a mental defilement that's causing you suffering. So don't dwell on it. Don't dwell on the memory. Okay, the memory pops up. Consciously let that memory go. Don't dwell on it. Don't keep thinking about that person who makes you angry. You're not hiding it. You acknowledge, oh, they've hurt me, they made me angry, but I'm not going to hold on, dwell on it in my mind. I'm going to let it go. And that takes practice. So maybe you practice mostly when you're on your own, away from the person. But eventually, if they are someone you still have to meet in daily life, well, you work to the point where you can be with them and you feel more calm because you're looking after your mind. You're not giving in to the anger. You can remember perfectly well what they've said and done and what they hurt you in the past. You know all that, and you won't necessarily be able to get rid of that. But you don't react with anger to the memory anymore. You just know it. Oh, one of those things. And there will be people in our life who have hurt us. One of the marvelous things about Dhamma practice, though, is, of course, that can change if you work on it. Maybe not in every case, because some people's aversion to us or the relationship is just very deeply tainted and there's not much you can do about it. But sometimes somebody has hurt you, you argued or you had some kind of incident with this person, but you work at the mindfulness, the forgiveness, the letting go, and maybe they also work at the same thing, and your whole relationship can change, usually over time. So maybe after a long time, you can meet that person, you don't feel angry anymore, it's gone. In a few cases, you can even become friends with them, or at least have a working relationship, peaceful relationship with them. You may not like them that much, but you can get on well with them. Your perception about them changes. Particularly Dhamma practitioners, this can happen. At first, they fall out for whatever reason. They argue, maybe over the Dhamma, over some aspect of Dhamma practice. They fall out, they hurt each other, they're annoyed, they're upset, they stop speaking. But because they're both Dhamma practitioners, they realize part of this problem is internal. It's not all the other person, it's also me. And that realization is very powerful, very important. You take responsibility for your own anger, you work on it to let go, and hopefully the other party is also letting go. So sometimes you see the beauty of the Dhamma when two people who formerly were enemies stop being enemies, and they can sit down together, and they may not be the best of friends perhaps, but they can be peaceful and cooperate and be together. And it happens. I've seen it many times. So there's always hope. We have to work on it. But, the memory itself is something you're just going to have to live with. But how you treat the memory, how you react to it, respond to it, that's where you practice.
Sadhu Lingpo. Next question. Many times when I see people living in society, I see the dukkha people are experiencing, yet we are unable to help everyone. Either we know or we don't know Sometimes I feel sad to recognize that I'm not able to help. Can I do better than just having compassion for them?
Well, don't belittle compassion. Just having compassion for them is an amazing thing, a good thing. If everyone in the world had that, all the wars and conflicts would stop straight away. So compassion is not a small thing. I guess what you're saying is, it's just a thought, and there's maybe you're not able to do anything more practical or concrete. Well, yeah, it's a big world we live in, billions of people. You're not going to be able to help everyone. So starting with just the basic thought of compassion is a good starting point. It's a thought, but it can be a very powerful thought that you can develop all the way to jhana, where your mind is just totally absorbed in compassion and can radiate it in all directions to all beings, even the ones who have hurt you and that you don't like. That's an amazing thing, but that's a progress, isn't it? A progress through the practice of bringing your mind to be one pointed on the thought of compassion. And we were talking a bit earlier about subject object. When your mind is completely absorbed into the thought of compassion, that sense of subject object, or me, us and them, me and you, fades. It's like it breaks down the borders between people. So, all the wars in the world, which are often one country next to another country fighting, if they all practice compassion just as a thought, on the level of thought, all those differences would start to dissolve, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, but that's what compassion does. It dissolves the borders, the differences, the conflicts based on differences, different views, different beliefs, different cultures, different genders, different this, different that, different land, different property. That all fades away when we practice compassion. So the more we practice, the better for the world, better for everyone. Of course, it will lead into how we behave, our conduct, and to concrete sort of helping in terms of material help or advice or doing things or giving forgiveness, or all kinds of things will stem from that. But just starting with the thought of compassion is an amazing thing, and I'd recommend it. Literally, compassion, what is it? In Buddhism, it means the wish to be free from suffering, the wish for someone else who's suffering to be free from suffering, the wish for yourself to be free from suffering, and also the wish for someone else not to fall into suffering. So it's like preventative as well, or the wish for yourself not to fall into suffering. Keeping that wish in the mind, developing it in your speech, your actions every day, developing it. Partly that means becoming more sensitive to others, because the opposite of compassion is selfishness. Why do wars start and conflicts start? Because of selfishness. So compassion means we have to learn sometimes to put ourselves in their position, see things from their point of view, be more sensitive, more aware, so that we don't knowingly or sometimes unknowingly harm others. It's a whole practice in itself. And it comes with wisdom. Basically, it's indistinguishable. Sometimes you could say it's indistinguishable from wisdom once it's developed. Because as you understand, wisdom in Buddhism is understanding what is suffering, how does it arise, and how to fix it, how to end it. So if you understand that, you naturally become compassionate for yourself, because suffering is not to be wanted, it's not wanted, it's not to be held on to. Let it go, let the causes of suffering go. And then in others, if you see that in yourself, you'll see that in others. So the more you understand yourself through your practice, the more compassion you have for others. And instead of being afraid of others, hating others, selfishly wanting something from others, desiring things from others, compassion replaces all that the more you practice. So mindfulness and some contemplation of the Dhamma will lead directly on to compassion. Very good example, like the monks, we go and live in the forest sometimes, the jungle. you're with wild animals who who can hurt you. So usually you have some fear at first. You have fear of ghosts, fear of spirits, fear of animals, fear of people sometimes, people wandering around forests with guns, which you do get in most parts of the world. You have fear, which is the opposite of compassion again. So what do? If you're intent on training your mind, you're working how to understand this fear, to see it as an object of mind, something that arises, passes away, has its causes and conditions, and then when they change, it can change. So you start to understand better what fear is, how it arises, and how you can abandon it. And the more your fear subsides, what replaces it quite naturally without even trying, compassion fills the hole that fear left in your mind. So, myself and many, many other monks I know, they've gone into the forest, got in with fear of tigers, snakes, bears, whatever, or bad guys. And through understanding, mindfulness, clarity, you turn the fear into compassion. So instead of fearing the tiger, you feel sorry for it. Oh, tiger has a miserable life compared to me. Why should I fear something that is suffering much more than me? So instead of fearing it or being angry or wanting to attack it, defend against it, you feel sorry for it. That's what mindfulness and wisdom does. It changes your fear into compassion and understanding. So if you apply more mindfulness and contemplate and develop wisdom, compassion will be the natural result, or one of the natural results.
Sadhu Lumpur. Another question. Lumpur, may I know why the color blue is forbidden for robes?
Slip of the tongue there. I shouldn't have brought it up. Well, in the Vinaya for monks, we have, and I think it probably applies to bhikkhunis as well. There's a number of colors we're allowed, and there's a number of colors we're not allowed. The funny answer would be, what would the world be coming to if all the monks were walking around in blue robes? Oh dear. I got nothing against the color blue. It used to be my favorite color when I was a kid. But that's because I supported a football team with a blue strip. But for monks, maybe it's not the best color. One, it's hard to make robes out of blue using natural dyes. There's not many natural dyes. The ancient Brits did it, didn't they, with woad, this dye they call woad. And so you see posters of movies and books and photos and things of these ancient Britons with blue all over their face. I'm not sure the modern version is correct, accurate, but anyway, they say they had this blue dye. But monks' robes, it's easier to get a kind of a reddy brown or orangey brown color from the trees and the natural vegetation that's available to us. So blue wouldn't make much sense, I think. And it's also much more of a layperson's color. It's fashion, isn't it? Lots of shades of blue, and it's sort of associated with lay people. Whereas our color, the monk's browny orange color, is very unfashionable. Why can I say that? It's because when people go and try and buy some cloth in this color, they can't find it very easily. It just shows you it was a good pick by the Buddha. But anyway, there's certain colors we can't have. We can't have blue. We can't have black. We can't have, what other colors can't we have? Anyway, gold, probably gold and silver. There's a few colors we're not allowed to have. They just don't fit with the monk's life. So it's a practical thing as much as anything else. But you're a layperson, you can wear blue, enjoy it if you like it. Next question.
Sadhu. Next question. Ajahn, I am constantly bothered by guilt about letting go when my mum was in ICU and unconscious, when the nurse asked us if we still wanted to perform CPR and emergency rescue, we finally decided to let go. But sometimes we are wondering, is not rescuing the right act? And sometimes we will regret and thinking, what if we made a different decision? Will we have been able to save mum's life? How do we deal with this kind of guilt? And are we creating bad karma?
Yeah, it's a tricky situation that comes up more and more now because of the advances in medical technology and care in hospitals, particularly, and even at home. So more of it happens more often, doesn't it? That people are maybe very old, very sick, weak, close to death, but there are ways still to keep them alive. So I think partly this, I don't know your mum's particular situation and what happened, but if someone is already very old, they've been around a long time, maybe they've been very ill for a long time, very weak, then it may just seem appropriate that when the time comes and they're dying, you let them die. And that's not necessarily coming from not caring or anything like that. It's simply accepting the inevitability of death. You can always seek the advice of the doctors and nurses around you or who are involved in the person, in this case your mother, to try and get some advice. And they often say, well, look, there's nothing that will work. We can do some CPR, but it's not going to help, or something. They can give you some important advice and information, and you talk about it with your fellow family members. But if you reflect on impermanence, there will definitely be a time when you have to accept someone is dying, isn't it? Of course, if it's somebody earlier on in life or stronger, well, yeah, you probably would do CPR and do all the kinds of emergency resuscitation that's available, because they're not someone you were expecting to die, or maybe that you felt, or the advice was they're in a situation where they can still survive and recover. Well, of course, you would do your best. So it's a matter of time, place, the context of the situation, I think. And you just keep reflecting on impermanence and look at that situation. If they're really at the end of their life, they're very old, very weak, well, sometimes it's appropriate just to accept that and not seek further treatment. And you inform all the people, the relevant people, of that. That's okay. It's not any wish that they die or that you don't care. It's simply accepting that they've reached that point at the end of their life. As far as your guilt, well, guilt is always a negative karma. It's not to be encouraged. And often it's by dwelling on things. Like if somebody has already passed away and you have those thoughts, oh, I could have done this. What if that? What if this? We have lots of doubts, uncertainty, guilt. Try to stop, pause, and ask yourself, is this helping you? Is it helping them? Is it contributing to anything fruitful in your mind, in your life, or not? I think if you can calmly sit down and consider this, you'll have to admit guilt is not helping you. It's making you unhappy, miserable. Would your mum want you to be sitting there guilty? If she could speak now, I don't think she would want that. She'd want you to be happy, peaceful, and getting on with your life. She wouldn't want you trapped in guilt. If I die, I don't want a lot of people feeling guilty. Oh, could we have revived him or something? And we have to have sometimes, we have to also have a practical approach to this and just accept if there's nothing you can do, there's nothing you can do. Always with hindsight, after the event, you can think back. At the time, you couldn't think straight. Maybe later you can. So then you think, oh, I should have done this, should have done that. Very difficult. Who could know? As long as you keep your intention that you're trying to do a wholesome thing, the right thing, learn from the situation, cultivate compassion. You just do the best you can. Now that they've gone and you have your feeling of guilt, well, have compassion for yourself and don't burden yourself with this guilt. Let it go. practice mindfulness, meditate, and let the guilt go, and learn from it. Maybe in the future there'll be someone else you're caring for who's elderly and sick, and you can apply what you've learned from previous situations to this new situation. Life is all about learning, isn't it? And partly we learn from mistakes, partly we learn from things that were successful as well. So guilt in itself is not going to be helpful, it's suffering. So try and understand that and let it go.
Sadhu Luang Por. Next, we have a live question.
Evening, Luang Por, and thank you as ever for sharing the Dhamma. You started off by talking about Kalyana Mitta. And today, while walking, listening to Ajahn Amaro, I think at Pujai Sai, giving a retreat, he was talking about the same thing and the same passage in the suttas around Ananda discussion with the Buddha. And while listening to that and walking around, I thought, do I need to spend more time with Buddha's Kalyana Mitta and go out more to the monastery and so on and so forth. But from what you were saying, it sounds as if one can be one's own Kalyana Mitta, but can you also have Kalyana Mitta as in your friends and family who are moral, upright, generally not axe murderers type, bouncing off their goodwill and also trying to be a Kalyana Mitta back? Thank you.
Of course. Yeah, of course you can. So, our family members will possibly have lots of goodness and wisdom and good things in them, in their behavior and what they know. And when they talk to us, you focus on the good in them. And when they're suffering, well, maybe you can give them some support and advice as well. It is a two-way thing.
Yeah.
And there's no one perfect Kalyana Mitta that we should all be with all the time. You make the best of your situation. So Kalyana Mitta can just be one person you work with or live with or know, a friend, as well as teachers, formal teachers who we go and see and listen to and ask questions from. And also with technology now, Kalyana Mitta can also be like this. You're not living here with me now, but you can benefit from this discussion as you can with other Dhamma teachers, listening to their talks or even discussing online with them or reading things as well. So we actually have a whole variety of inputs that you could say are all supportive of Kalyana Mitta, the concept of Kalyana Mitta. But best of all is live Kalyana Mitta. So try to find some friends who you can share your Dhamma reflections with, who maybe have similar values, similar outlook, who can discuss things with you, remind you of things, you can remind them of things. And if you can't find anyone like that, well, then you do go to the temples and the monasteries and the retreat places to get the more traditional Kalyana Mitta. And that is a invaluable part of your practice as well. But how much, how often will depend on your situation.
Very good. Thank you so much. That's really helpful. Thank you.
So we have one more question for tonight. Last summer, when I stayed at a monastery, one Western couple staying there were very opinionated and always criticized other lay people and even the abbot there. I didn't agree with them, but I didn't know what to do and didn't know what was the best thing to do, so I didn't respond with anything. I'm still wondering if I should have said something or stayed silent, or staying silent was the best for me to do at that time.
Yeah, I think that's quite a common experience staying in monasteries. You'll meet some people who are very opinionated, some who are not. But remember why you're there. You're there to practice for yourself. You're not the teacher. There's a teacher, I assume, or even many teachers available in that monastery. So it's not really your responsibility. Of course, if you're having a conversation with someone, if you're in any position to discuss and help them understand things better, you may be able to help someone. But if you're not, or they're very opinionated, they're not listening to you, well, just leave them alone. Leave them be and get on with your practice. And that's fine. And, Ajahn Chah would talk about the monk who just quietly got on with his sitting and walking meditation, did the chores when it was chores time, ate the meal, was restrained in his use of food, got up when the bell went in the morning to get up for the morning meditation, came to the morning meditation, did everything just following the routine, didn't bother anyone, didn't talk much with anyone. He would say, oh, this monk is very useful for the monastery. We need more of them. So it's not your job to fix everyone else in the monastery. There'll be a teacher or someone else who has that role. If they seek advice from you, they ask your advice or you can share. But if they don't, maybe it's best not to butt in because, it may actually backfire and they start not liking you perhaps. So I would get on with your practice. If you're a layperson and you have a chance to go on retreat in a monastery or retreat situation, I'd treat that time as like gold. You want to use your time well, get on with your practice. And, the opinionated ones, they're going to have to learn to deal with their own personalities and attachments. And that's their job, not your job. So I would use the time for yourself. That's your priority.
Sadhu Luang Por. So I think that's all the questions we have for this session.
A lot of questions tonight. I hope some of your doubts have been assuaged, quietened down. Very nice to talk to you and wish you well for the future. May the blessings of Buddha Dhamma Sangha guide you and protect you.